Today is Friday, January 6th, and this is William Michael of the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. I want to make an important announcement today that I've been thinking about for quite a while, and I talked to my wife about it this morning, just asking what she thought, and she was in wholehearted agreement with my thoughts on the issue. And so I'm going to be moving forward with this because, like I said, I've been thinking about this for a while, and I'd like to go ahead and do it. I feel like I'm responsible to go forward and do this. And what this is I'm going to make a very significant change in modern mathematics courses in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. Now, when I started the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, we didn't have any modern math courses, and I didn't intend to teach modern mathematics in the classical Liberal Arts Academy. What happened was that in 2010, I had a number of requests from parents who had moved from other homeschool programs into the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, requests for modern math courses, because they were committed to the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, but they had these modern math requirements sort of hanging over their heads, distracting them, and they were hoping that I could provide a way for them to satisfy those requirements within the Classical Liberal Arts Academy's system, so their children's studies could all be concentrated in one place. That made sense to me, and I know it was 2010, which is 2 years into the Academy's development, because I remember receiving one email from a mother that actually persuaded me to do it, and my wife was in labor with my son Daniel when I received that email. I can still remember receiving the email and responding to it later. And it was at that point that I decided to offer some modern mathematics courses in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, just because parents were asking me to do so to help them take care of modern math requirements, grade level requirements, high school requirements, just from modern mathematics. And so what I did was I uploaded copies of Ray's Mathematics series, which is a complete series of mathematics textbooks from the late 1800s, early 1900s. I uploaded them all to the Academy website, and I set up a number of courses and worked those textbooks into those courses so that a complete modern mathematics program would be available in the Academy system. And that's really all I did with it. Because like I said, in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, my intention was never to teach modern mathematics, because modern mathematics are required only for school use in 99% of the cases, and there are 1,000 programs already available that allow children to learn basic school mathematics, college prep mathematics. It's just not a priority. It's not a need. But I agreed to do it because I understood what the parents were saying, and I thought it was reasonable for them to say, can't we just add these courses so we can be focused in on the Academy system and not have to do all these other things? So as I said, I installed a number of modern math courses using the Ray's mathematics textbooks. And for any students who want to work through those books, there's a few things that are good about those books. Number one, they're intended for individual student mastery. That's good. Modern math textbooks are designed for use in classes and schools where kids are just going to get grades. They're not even intended for mastery. The Ray's series was intended for individual student mastery. That's what's good about the Ray's series. And that's also what some families don't like about the Ray's series, is that it actually is intended for individual mastery and they're just looking to check boxes. So, it's one of those situations where no matter what I do, people are going to be unhappy. But at least there is a set of courses available on the study center that families can use to pursue modern math studies. Now, with that being said, remember that before I started studying the classics when I was in college, before I committed myself to classical education, I was a pre-med student. I was studying math. I was studying modern natural sciences. I was a Dean's List pre-med biology major at Rutgers University. I was very comfortable in modern mathematics, very comfortable modern natural sciences, but in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, that just wasn't my focus. It wasn't what I was setting out to do, and I had no idea how the academy was going to grow. Having said that, and being responsible for the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, I know, because of my knowledge of historical sources and educational philosophy, I know that there's a better way to teach modern mathematics. There's a better way to teach modern mathematics, and I have in fact taught it. When I hosted boys for boarding school studies back a few years ago, I led them in studies through geometry, algebra, arithmetic, and so on. And I taught those boys the way that I would like for modern mathematics to be taught as a classicist, as a philosopher, and so on. And I know about all these sources. I've taught these sources. I know the value of these sources, but they're not available in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. They're not available in any other homeschool or private school or public school study program anywhere. And recently, especially as my younger children are growing up, and I'm seeing how important modern mathematics studies are for their practical opportunities and career pursuits as they go to college and things like that. I'd like to give my children, and by extension all Classical Liberal Arts Academy students, what I consider to be the best possible modern mathematics education. Now, what this means is that I would present a number of courses in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy that are very different than anything available anywhere. The first course is already available. It's the Intro to Classical Arithmetic course. I started teaching that course back in 2009 or so because I didn't want to teach modern mathematics, but at the same time I knew that parents were not ready to go all the way into the classical quadrivium. It was too foreign, too crazy. And so I developed a course called Intro to Classical Arithmetic, and I taught an old arithmetic textbook. And as I started teaching that course, the feedback was amazing, and parents were saying that it was the best math course that they had ever seen. And this has nothing to do with me. It's the textbook itself. It's the content and arrangement of the textbook. But the feedback was, this is the best math course we've ever seen from homeschool parents. So the first of these courses is Intro to Classical Arithmetic, which I will recommend. The second course that I am going to make available, and it's already on the study center, I'm just announcing it for the first time in this talk, is Euler's Algebra. Euler is spelled E-U-L-E-R. Euler was one of the most significant mathematicians in the 18th century, and his textbook on algebra is infinitely better than anything available today. And what's so valuable about the old textbooks is that these modern systems of symbols and signs and mathematical language and things like that, these were developed in the 16, 17, 1800s. And we have the books written by the men who were developing them. And the reason why they're so valuable is because those men could explain every detail of modern mathematics in the simplest terms, because they really understood all the details. So, for example, in algebra, if I were to say that A, the letter A, or the quantity A, to the 0 power equals 1. A to the 0 power with an exponent of 0 equals 1. A student can be told to memorize that and just learn it as a fact of algebra. But no student can explain why A to the 0 power equals 1. In his algebra book, Euler can explain that to a 5-year-old child. It's just made so clear and so simple. And that's why these old textbooks, as far as understanding concepts in mathematics, they just can't be beat. There's no comparison. And I would like for my students in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy, if they're going to study modern mathematics, I would like them to study these old works in mathematics, because I would like them to gain mastery in mathematics. I would like Classical Liberal Arts Academy students to study mathematics the way that the great fathers of modern mathematics actually studied modern mathematics. They didn't study them using modern school textbooks, obviously. They didn't study them in K-12 schools, obviously. They studied them in more of a philosophical way, where they really understood the concepts, the principles of the modern mathematical sciences. And because they understood the principles, they could also put them to work and use them in practical applications. That's why we usually find that the great breakthrough scientists like Isaac Newton were also great mathematicians. Isaac Newton, at least partially, invented the science of calculus because he needed it in order to continue in his work in physics. And so you can see how this philosophical understanding of mathematics with a practical application in natural sciences, how they go together. In order to get into new fields of sciences and answer new problems, those people working in those areas, working on those problems, have to use mathematics as a tool, a flexible tool. It can't be a subject that they barely understand or that they simply imitate what their teachers showed them to do when they were solving homework exercises. So I'd like to sort of challenge parents and say, look, if you want to talk about modern mathematics, how about we don't simply follow the modern schools or do what the modern schools are doing? How about we actually go for real mastery? How about we actually develop the best modern mathematics program available anywhere? Because we can do that in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. So if a student took the Introduction to Classical Arithmetic course, Euler's Algebra, which is already available on the Academy Study Center, studied Euclid's Classical Geometry, and then after that continued to study Euler's Algebra and went into other mathematical writings by men like Isaac Newton, René Descartes, and so on, these students would have the best modern mathematical education in the world. And it would solve many problems that we face in modern Christian education. I think the children would enjoy it much more than these boring, modern, problem-based math textbooks. And I think we would actually raise some students who were master mathematicians, who really understood the history and principles, the philosophical foundations of mathematics, and could actually take the mathematical sciences with them into their adult lives, into their professional occupations, and use them like tools, the way the fathers of the mathematical sciences understood and used them. So I'd like to challenge parents to consider moving children into these courses for what I am assuring you will be the best modern mathematics education available anywhere. Intro to Classical Arithmetic, Euler's Algebra, Euclid's Geometry, which is our classical geometry course, and then continuing to study through all of the parts of Euler's Algebra. It's a large book, 470 pages, that covers all of the principles of algebra. I would recommend that as a course of study that will produce the best modern mathematics students. Now, I know that there will be objections, and I'd like to address some of those objections because I've already thought about them. The first objection goes something like this. If students don't learn to solve modern math problems, then they're going to get modern math problems wrong when they see them on the SAT test. If they don't learn to solve modern math problems in modern textbooks, in modern math courses, then they're going to get them wrong when they take a modern math test like the SAT. That's a first objection, and it's false, and I'll explain why. First of all, let me remind you that I was an SAT prep teacher. I was trained to teach SAT prep by the Princeton Review. I was an SAT essay scorer, and I taught private school students in 11th and 12th grade to prepare for the SAT, and I led a number of students to perfect scores on the SAT. I understand how the SAT works, and let me make this crystal clear. The SAT is not a high school math test. Get this through your head because it's very important. The SAT is not a high school math test. And this objection to my recommendation is simply false. And let me explain why. The math questions on the SAT are taken from only two subjects. They're taken from algebra and geometry. There's no trigonometry on the SAT. There's no pre-calculus on the SAT. There's no calculus on the SAT. The SAT test only covers algebra and geometry. Why that's significant is because in modern high schools, that's simply 9th and 10th grade math. So whatever students are doing in 11th and 12th grades, it has nothing to do with the SAT. The SAT is simply testing algebra and geometry. It's not an advanced math test. So that's the first thing. Secondly, the SAT test does not ask questions like those in high school math textbooks. The SAT math questions are not like the questions in high school math textbooks. What the SAT math does is tests understanding of the principles of algebra and geometry. It does exactly the opposite of what modern high school courses do. It tests exactly what I'm saying the children should study, not by studying modern math textbooks, by studying modern mathematics the way that the fathers of modern mathematics studied mathematics. So this objection that they won't be able to understand the problems is simply false. They will be able to understand the problems even more clearly than students in modern schools will be able to understand them. Because the SAT math questions are seeking understanding of principles of mathematics, not whether or not a student can find an answer to a question. Thirdly, when parents object and say that kids are going to get SAT questions wrong because they don't study them using modern math textbooks, this argument is false because students in modern math classes already get SAT math questions wrong. So obviously, modern math classes are not the answer. And as I said, they get the questions wrong on the SAT because the SAT does not ask questions like high school math textbook questions. So that objection is all wrong. I can provide 3 proofs that destroy that first objection. A second objection will be something like, we need to promote, modern thinking and modern discoveries, modern technology, modern advances in the sciences. So going back to old textbooks is going to present our kids with a weird view of modern math and sciences because they're going to be looking at old books rather than the latest technology. This objection is also just ridiculous. If we wanted our children to understand modern technology and appreciate modern technology, we would let them use computers and calculators in all of their math classes. Modern school math classes don't let the kids use computers and calculators to solve problems, or they strictly limit what the kids are able to do because let me say this, it's not because they want to test and make sure the kids understand the principles, because they're not teaching the principles. The modern high schools teach one method to solve problems, and they want to make sure that the kids solve the problems following their instructions, using their method. And that's not how mathematicians think. So the modern schools are not examples of, innovative modern teachers and schools bringing the latest tools and technology into the classroom and allowing students to. They're doing the opposite. They're not even raising scientifically minded students. They're not even raising problem solvers. They're showing kids that there's one way to solve a problem, and then they're checking to make sure that students solve the problem using that specific method that they learned in the classroom. And that is not good for children to develop understanding of modern mathematics. That's not how the fathers of modern mathematics did it, and that's not how our children should study it. So they are not making any use of technology. They're simply promoting whatever the popular method or fad is in math education at the time, and they're making that mandatory, and they won't allow the use of any technology or tools if they can't assess their one approved method. And I use an illustration like this to show how foolish this is. Because this is what modern schools do, and I want you to see how ridiculous it is. When I was a private school teacher, I was usually the high school basketball coach. I was the varsity basketball coach, and so I had to take kids from 9th through 12th grades. Many of the kids didn't play basketball much. They had to learn the basics of the sport. And we started in their freshman year and tried to develop them as they went through their 4 years of high school. Most of the kids were not even built like basketball players. I had a lot of soccer players and things like that who wanted to play basketball. So they were athletic, they were in good shape, but they didn't have basketball skills. So when we started practices, especially early on in freshman year, we had to drill and learn techniques for basic things like how to shoot a layup. I had to show them step by step the proper technique for shooting a layup, and we had to practice it. Step 1, step 2, step 3. Practice and practice and practice. And the boys had to line up, and they had to go through these drills and learn the correct techniques step by step by step, for example, to make a layup. Now, imagine this team of boys all practicing this technique for making a layup. And imagine me watching them go through each step and saying, good, that's right, no, fix this, turn this way, move this leg first, put your foot here. Imagine me giving the instructions step by step and then watching and telling the kid, good, no, not good, better, do it again, and so on. There's an assumption in this drill, and the assumption is that no one can score unless they learn this method for making a layup. Now, imagine if LeBron James came to my private school and was a 14, 15-year-old freshman, and he was 6'4", freakishly athletic, and so on. Imagine him standing in this layup drill line, me teaching him the method that I'm teaching all the boys on how to make a layup, and him going through that layup line just like all the other boys do, with me watching to make sure he follows the instructions, and me correcting him and stopping him and making him do it again and again until he perfectly follows the technique that I'm teaching him. And as we do this, imagine if he all of a sudden stops and asks me, hey, Mr. Michael, can I just dunk it? The whole layup instruction would blow up. Why would this kid need to learn the technique to make a layup when he can already dunk? The assumption is that no one can dunk. But if we have a kid who can already dunk, why does he need to learn the instructions for how to make a layup like some 5'6" soccer player who has no idea how to play basketball? We wouldn't make that 15-year-old LeBron James worry about the steps for layup making because he's already beyond that. And if we play a game and he breaks away with the ball, he's not going to need to think of his training in the layup line as he gets to the basket. He's just going to go up and stuff the ball into the basket, and it's over with. Now, the problem is that there are many kids in math classes in modern schools who are like LeBron James on a basketball court. They're being taught methods of problem solving. They're being taught techniques, and they're being graded by whether they follow those techniques when they could solve those problems on their own, by their own natural intelligence, by their own natural reasoning power, by their own natural ability to solve problems. I was like this as a kid. My experience in sports, and my father owned race cars, and I grew up around race cars and mechanics and all the engineering of racing and all of the science of racing. I grew up and took all of that stuff for granted. I knew all about aerodynamics and weight distribution and tire, the different softness and hardness of tires and track conditions and speeds and all these different ideas. I knew all those things from racing and from sports. And so when I went into a high school physics class, I already understood 3/4 of the concepts that the teacher explained in class because I used them and observed them in sports and in racing. I could solve problems because I already understood the concepts. I didn't need to learn the teacher's way to understand the concept. I didn't need to learn the teacher's way to find the answer. And the teachers would get upset if I found the correct answer but didn't follow their one method. In fact, my freshman math teacher gave me detention and made me stay after school and take a test in front of her alone because I wrote all the answers to the test and didn't write any work, and she accused me of cheating, and I wasn't cheating. And this is the experience of many high school students. Because the schools are not really concerned with whether the kids understand mathematics. They're simply teaching one approved method, and they're judging the kids by whether they follow the steps of that one method. It has nothing to do with any real mastery of mathematics. And to tell you the truth, many of the techniques they teach kids today are just goofy and ridiculous. What really matters is that kids learn and understand the principles and the concepts in modern mathematics. And those principles and concepts, if you want to understand them, the best place to learn and have those concepts explained is in these older textbooks. Like I said, the Introduction to Classical Arithmetic course, Euler's Algebra for all topics in algebra, and then Euclid's Geometry. Another objection will be, if you study these books from, Euclid is ancient. Euler wrote in the 1700s. If you study these books, what about all of the mathematical development in recent centuries? The kids are only going to understand primitive ideas in mathematics. They're not going to know anything about the latest and most important modern developments. So won't the kids have sort of an outdated knowledge of mathematics? That's another objection. My answer to this objection is, first of all, kids in modern schools are not learning the things you're talking about anyway, so you're demanding of the method that I recommend results that your modern method doesn't produce. So let's compare apples with apples. Don't compare what I recommend with some imaginary fantasy ideal. Compare it with what actually exists as the alternative. The alternative is a modern mathematics system that almost no one likes and succeeds in, almost no one uses, and we all know is unproductive and ineffective. So I don't care what the modern high school program says the kids learn on paper, on the curriculum manual pages and things like that, because the kids don't actually really learn the stuff that's on the pages of the curriculum guide. I'd like to compare what I know students can learn with what students are actually learning in modern math courses. So don't bring all of the ideals and these imaginary standards that everyone knows no kids in modern schools are actually achieving. Let's compare what we can actually do with these studies as I recommend them with what modern schools and homeschools are actually doing. For example, the Seton Homeschool Study Program, you think you take your kids out of a modern school, take them away from all the bad influences in a modern school, bring them home in a Christian environment where they have parents dedicated to their education, and the end result is that kids are barely scoring higher on the SAT than the average American child. That should be a flashing, red signal that something is really wrong, because homeschooling is so expensive with respect to money and time and energy and sacrifices parents need to make. If all you can show for that investment is a few points on an SAT score, something's wrong. We're comparing kids whose families are dedicated to their education. We're comparing their scores with the average American student. There's no way that we should accept that kind of a comparison. We should be asking, what's the best that we can actually do? Not how can we beat the public schools by a few points with a program that's just like the public school program. So these objections all fail. They're either just ridiculous double standards, or they're simply historically untrue and irrational because they don't apply to the actual situations that we face. What I would like to do is provide these Catholic homeschool kids with a completely different approach to studying modern mathematics. And now everyone will say, oh, well, this, what if you're just wrong and you're crazy and we're going to... How can studying the writings of the fathers of the modern mathematical sciences be crazy? I think the opposite is crazy. I think the study of books being written by people who are not masters and considered historical fathers of mathematics, studying their textbooks and just accepting whatever results come after we study their text, I think that's the crazy method. Going back and actually studying the writings of men like Euclid and Isaac Newton and Leonard Euler, in my opinion, is the way that's not risky and is more certain and sure. Plus, I think that college math programs, college math professors would absolutely love the idea of getting students in their math programs who studied math in this way rather than the way modern schools are doing it. Just like I would love to get a 15-year-old kid who could dunk rather than the normal group of kids that I got and had to coach in freshman basketball. So we're really trapped in this modern school mindset, and we're incapable of thinking of how we could simply blow up those standards and abandon them because they don't apply to us. They don't apply to homeschooled Catholic families who can do much more and have much better resources than any public school can possibly offer. So we can do much more. We can blow up these standards. We can ignore the method of the day that's being employed and promoted at the local school. And we can actually go back to the writings of these great historical, philosophically minded mathematicians and read their explanations of the principles of the mathematical sciences and understand the concepts that the SAT test in modern times is actually testing for. We can actually have our children learn to think the way that the fathers of modern mathematics thought, study the way the fathers of modern mathematics taught students to study, and then take this knowledge into new, modern, complex, unexpected problems in the modern world and solve them in creative ways because they actually know the principles, which modern students don't. We can raise our children in modern mathematics to actually understand and use mathematics the way that the fathers of the modern natural sciences did 300 years ago, men like Isaac Newton, René Descartes, and so on. So I'm recommending to parents in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy this course of action for modern mathematical studies. The courses that I'd like students to focus on, if you're interested in following my advice, are Introduction to Classical Arithmetic, Euler's Algebra, and our Classical Geometry course. Those are the three main courses. The Introduction to Arithmetic will cover just about every concept in arithmetic, which is basically like through 6th grade math. Euler's Algebra will take the kids through every detail of modern algebra. Euclid's Geometry will teach kids the principles, the elements of geometry. That's why Euclid's work is called The Elements. And then if kids get through that and they've got a year or two left at the end of their high school studies, then we can move on into some other advanced works by these fathers of modern mathematics. But we don't need to talk about that much because the kids would have to get there first before we even worry about that. But that's what I'm recommending. I'm going to leave the Raise Mathematics courses in the Academy Study Center for families to use, but I'm not going to devote my attention to those courses because they're standalone courses. They just are what they are. They have the answers in the textbooks. The kids need to just read the instructions and complete the exercises and move through those courses. So if all those modern arithmetic courses, I'm going to leave them up for parents to use if they'd like to, but I'm going to devote my teaching time and energy and resources to these three courses and try to build a program that I think can actually raise some Catholic kids to be elite, old-fashioned math students who understand the history and the principles of modern mathematics and can enter into modern applications with a philosophical understanding of mathematics rather than this lazy, solve problems by imitating your teacher approach, which doesn't really teach kids how mathematics works. So I recommend these courses for the kids, and I think that you'll see, especially with a course like Euler's Algebra, there's so much complaining in modern education about algebra. So many kids groan and complain about algebra, and the kids are right. The courses are terrible. They don't explain the concepts. They don't show the kids why these things matter. They don't teach in a way that gives the kids a sense that they're learning and understanding. When these kids go through Euler's Algebra, it's going to be totally different. Because when you read Euler's Algebra, you finish a paragraph and say, wow, I actually understand that, and it's really simple. And you never feel that way in a modern math course. But the kids will feel that way in Euler's Algebra, and then Euclid's Geometry is always a favorite course. So Introduction to Classical Arithmetic, Euler's Algebra, and Euclid's Elements of Geometry, our Classical Geometry course. Those are going to be the three main focal points of our work in modern mathematics in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. And of course, I also urge kids, especially in their later high school years, to take up the classical mathematics, to study classical arithmetic, to get into classical music, to at least become familiar with classical astronomy. So there's tons of content for any students who are interested in mathematics. But let me close with this question for parents and students. Just to wrap this all up, if you wanted to become a master of mathematics, do you believe that the better course would be to follow the modern schools, which are not producing masters of mathematics? Or do you believe the better course would be to follow the instruction written by the masters of mathematics? Which do you think is the surer course to lead you to success in the mastery of mathematics? I think the answer is very simple. And as the headmaster who takes responsibility for the instruction, I feel like I'm obligated to improve the modern mathematics program and make these courses available in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. If you have any questions, please get in touch. I'm happy to get into the details of these things. These courses are already available now on the Academy Study Center, and kids can get started in them anytime that they'd like. So if you have any questions, get in touch. But take this as my personal advice for modern mathematics studies in the Classical Liberal Arts Academy. I hope that helps. God bless your studies.